Good morning.
Morning. Morning.
Beautiful autumn day, a little bit chilly. There's a couple members of the assembly hanging on in the garden trying to find some sun. So thank you for that, and everyone here in the hall and everyone that's joining through the miracles of the internet and these cameras and things. Over the next couple of weeks, we'll have to make some decisions about how to run things as it gets colder. So just keep your eye on the weekly mailing that goes out on Tuesday, sometimes on Wednesdays, and we'll announce there if there's going to be a change. I'm thinking next week is one of the most important celebrations, ceremonies, rituals that we do in the year called Segaki, which I'll speak about today. And I've been having some ideas about maybe a big fire in the yard and having the whole thing outside. Or anyway, we'll decide in the next little bit of time, and that will be in the mailing. So if you're not on the mailing list, you can join that on the website really easily, or there's a list out here. You can see the greeter afterwards to make sure that you're informed. But for today, we'll just bundle up. If you put your hands inside your something, it's amazing how much difference it makes just to have your hands a little bit warm. When I was studying with my teacher in Japan, the temple is very, very cold in northern Japan, and I learned that these robes, which usually are a lot of work to kind of lug around, they're great because you can put your hand inside. You put your hand inside like this, and then keeps them warm. So Segaki, oftentimes now referred to as Sejiki or Osejikie, is really foundational practice of our school of Buddhism. Really all over Japan, the Segaki is practiced, is performed throughout the country in many different schools of Buddhism. And it is an ancient and profound practice, which dates back to a particular sutra called the Blazing Mouth Sutra, in which there's recounted this story of how Ananda, one of the Buddha's disciples, really one of his closest disciples, his lifelong attendant, was visited by a being from another realm called the realm of the hungry ghosts. And before I get into the story, I'd just like for people to reflect a little bit about the importance of story. That we are inundated with stories now. We have so much media. You can watch a 20-minute sitcom story, or you can watch a 42-minute Netflix special story, or you can watch a 1 hour, or you can watch a 2 hour, or you can watch, how many seasons of Game of Thrones are there? 6 or something, 8. Oh my gosh, you could just so there's so many stories. And this is a human nature for us to live through story, to live in and through stories. And although we have so much access to story now, I think also many of us are hungry for stories that are speaking into the deep truth of our being. Traditionally, these types of stories are known as mythology. And when we use the word myth, I don't mean a lie. I don't mean something that didn't happen. When we talk about the mythology of Buddhism, we're talking about stories that are true. It's just that their trueness is not about them being historically verifiable. Right? Their trueness is not about them being historically verifiable. Their trueness is about how it is that they inform our heart and mind and body in the practice of the Buddha Dharma. That's what we're looking to in terms of their truth, not for them to be historically true or verifiable in some way. So this story about Ananda and the Buddha and him being visited by this incredible being named Enku is a true story. But it's the kind of story that we need to hear, we need to listen to, not just in terms of something that happened out there, but something that is happening in here, and is happening in here over and over and over again. It's about some kind of truth which is eternal and profound. Not just about a truth about something that happened someplace else. So, in this story, Ananda is dwelling outside of Kapilavastu in the Nyagroda Park. He would have been there with an assembly of monks and with the Buddha on retreat. And they would have spent their time meditating, going into town to receive alms, eating those alms, listening to teachings from the Buddha, and performing some kinds of practices or rituals that they would do together communally. But much of the meditation would have happened on their own. So the monks would have found a place to practice. And then they would come together for teachings or for meals or for some types of practices. So it's said that on one night of this retreat, Ananda was in meditation late into the night. He's just sitting up. If you've never sat meditation at nighttime, I highly encourage it, especially as it gets crisp like it is now, and the stars are out, and we get blessed by a moon. You know, the moon last night, I don't know if anyone saw, was so bright and clear. You know, when the weather is crisp, it gets like that. Sitting into the night, there's something that you can encounter that's hard to encounter during the day. And so Ananda's there, he's sitting late into the night, and he encounters something. And he's visited by a being, by a kind of demonic being, whose hair is wild and rough, and his eyes are luminous but with a fierceness. His mouth wafts out flame and smoke, and his neck is tiny, and his belly is bulging with long fingernails. And he appears before Ananda and he says, Ananda, you will lose your life in 3 days. And Ananda says, well, who are you? Who are you to deliver this message to me? And the being says, my name is Enku, which translates as blazing mouth. And I am the king of the hungry ghosts. The king of the pretas is the term that's used in Buddhism. You will lose your life in 3 days. And Ananda asks him, he says, well, why? And without giving specifics, Enku says, it is your karma. It is your unavoidable karma. And so Ananda asks him, isn't there some way that I can avoid this karma? Isn't there some way that I can get around the karmic situation that I'm in? And Enku says no. And then he says, but there is maybe one way. Right? He said, if you can feed me, and you can feed all of the host of hungry ghosts, all the assembly, all the millions and billions and trillions of hungry ghosts that live in my world. And furthermore, if you can feed all holy ones, and you can make a complete offering to the 3 treasures, then perhaps your life will be lengthened, and I can drop this form of a hungry ghost and be reborn into the heavenly realms. And so hearing this, Ananda goes to the Buddha. And I imagine he must have been in quite a difficult state. He's been told that he'll die because of his karma by a being that seemed to know what he was talking about. He was showing up with all the fierceness of our karma. And he doesn't know if he should believe him. He doesn't know if this proposal for how it is that he might be able to avoid his karma could be true or not. But what Enku has taught him, or what Enku has taught him in terms of how he could overcome his karma, seems impossible. How could he feed all of those beings? So he goes to the Buddha and he says, I don't know what to do. And the Buddha says, don't worry, Ananda. I know about this conundrum. I know about this karma, this insatiable karma. And I was taught a way to accomplish what Enku has told you you must accomplish to save your life and to save his. And furthermore, the Buddha says that he learned this method while he was dwelling in the assembly of Avalokitesvara, or the Bodhisattva of compassion. And that the method involves gathering together pure food and pure water and using a dharani to reveal the true nourishment of that food and water so that all beings can be nourished. And so the next day, as the assembly of monks comes together, Shakyamuni Buddha teaches the monks and Ananda how to perform this. They do, and Ananda's life is spared. And we could assume Enku was also liberated. So it's a simple story, but an important one. This story is about nourishment. It's a story that helps us ask the question, where does nourishment emerge? How are beings nourished? Physically, mentally, emotionally, socially, spiritually, soulfully? What is nourishment? How do we receive that life energy so that we can stay well and the world can stay well? And in this case, food is the most tangible facet of that nourishment. It's a fundamental way that we understand nourishment, to receive food, right? I mean, even if we say the word nourishment, you think like bread or rice or, I don't know, maybe bananas, whatever it is you like. But that's what you think of, right? You think of food. And so in this story, we talk about food, but talking about food is talking about all of these things, right? Not just about physical nourishment. Think about emotional nourishment, right? Social nourishment. How do you stay alive in all of these different realms, all of these different facets of your being? Our imbalance with food, the way in which it is difficult for us to know the nourishment of food, is a facet of our overall imbalance. Our overall imbalance with the totally mutually interpenetrating mind that supports all of our life. As we grab onto things and we try to shove them into our gullet, either our stomach gullet, or our mind, or our heart, or our social environment, we're enacting this fundamental kind of misalignment. Within Buddhism, that is personified as the hungry ghosts. Preta, again, is what they're called. In Japanese, they're called gaki, which is also a common term that's used for children, which is kind of like, I always want to say gaki, like when you say this, all these kids, you say kids, they term it gaki. I think this is the big arrogance of adults. Actually, usually I find the other way around. The kids are quite generous and adults are a little bit stingy. Anyway, so preta or gaki, the image of the preta or the gaki is just what I described with Enku. Their throats are thin like a pencil and their bellies are swollen. And they roam in the land of the hungry ghosts, in the world of the hungry ghosts, trying to find nourishment. And the land is filled with things that could nourish them. But as they grab it and they put it in their mouth, it turns into fire, or it turns into pus, or it turns into blood. They can't get it down their throats. So think about that image. I mean, it's a gruesome image. If you've been with people who are starving, or you've seen photographs of people who are starving, this is what they look like. The throat becomes incapable of receiving nourishment, and the belly swells. And so, in this world, as they're roaming around and they're finding all of these things that could be nourishing, because they don't know what it means to be nourished, they don't know what it means to eat, it's incapable of receiving the nourishment. The physical nourishment is what's focused on here, but it also is emotional, mental, spiritual, soulful, all of those things. What keeps the hungry ghost locked in that realm? We say fundamentally that the hungry ghosts, they can only think about, or they can only view nourishment as consumption. Does this sound familiar to you? They can only think about, or they can only view. Now, think sounds active, right? Like you're sitting there thinking about it. When I say think here, that's not what I mean. It's more like view. They can only see nourishment as consumption. That's the only way they can envision it. That's what traps us in the realms that we're trapped in, is the way that we envision the world. That becomes our world. If you envision the world as a place of consumption, you will be trapped in the world where nourishment looks like consumption, but you'll never be satisfied. You never actually find nourishment. Because if nourishment is about getting something outside, inside, there's no end to that. It's a bottomless hole inside here, because your mind is projected to the outside again and again and again and again, and you're trying to put it inside, but it doesn't work. Because they can only view nourishment as consumption of an object, they're cut off from true nourishment. The relationship or unity of the particular and the whole is lost. It's lost to delusion, or ignorance, we say sometimes. It's channeled as delusion or channeled as ignorance, which makes greed the inevitable outcome. So what do I mean by the relationship or unity of the particular and the whole? This is exactly what we've been studying in the Prajnaparamita teachings, which we've been exploring over the past several months in terms of the various paramitas. The paramita of generosity, this is very much about, the paramita of sila or ethics, the paramita of patience, paramita of vigor, paramita of meditation, and the paramita of wisdom. We've been studying all of those, and we've been studying them in relationship to this dynamic. What is the relationship between the particular and the whole? Because we think there's a particular, right, which is set apart from the whole, then we give way to this understanding of consumption, which is, I need to get things inside of me. Right? I need to take an object from outside and put it inside. That's what's going to nourish me. We've cut off the unity of my individual identity or my individual being and the rest of the world. But the Prajnaparamita teachings tell us that that's not actually how things are. That the particular and the whole are not set against each other. Right? You don't get one or the other. They're always together. So this is the teaching that I keep coming back to week after week, about the tree. A tree is not a tree, therefore it's a tree. This is the one we've been coming back to again and again. I hope you're getting bored with it enough that it's really sticking. That's usually a good sign that it's sticking. You're like, yeah, we've talked about this a bunch of times. Okay, so that's sticking. Right? So think about this. When we say the tree is not a tree, that's why it's a tree. We can encounter a tree, right? The phenomena of a tree is something that we can be aware of. But being aware of that phenomena of a tree, right, doesn't mean that the tree is an object outside of ourselves. In fact, the arising of the phenomena of the tree is wholeness. It is everything showing up as the tree. You can follow it out, right? It's pretty easy. The tree, the water, the earth, the sun. In a physical way, you could follow out everything it takes for that tree to appear there. You could follow it out mentally. Like, what does it take for there to be any phenomena appearing? It takes some consciousness, right? There has to be a consciousness involved for there to be an appearance in consciousness. And so our looking at the tree, our encounter of the tree, that's involved in the tree appearing. All right? So the particularness of the person who's experiencing the tree or the tree itself is this great, fabulous mystery that is showing up as this phenomena. When you look at a tree that way, it's not just, it's just a tree. It has a luminosity, a fabulous luminosity. We could call it beauty, but it's not just about an aesthetic beauty. It's about knowing something by being able to encounter the luminosity of that tree. We know that I'm not alone, that I'm not separate, that there is something that arises as my being, and the arising of this tree, we're so important to each other. This is what the pretas have completely lost. That interdependence has been channeled into, the ignorance of that interdependence has been channeled into greed. We're still interdependent, but the interdependence is, give me that apple, I got to get it inside myself. And as they do, it turns into fire, it turns into blood, it turns into pus. It can't actually nourish them. So this is a great conundrum. It's maybe the central conundrum of the way. How do we work with that? When we're mired in ignorance, we're mired in greed. What do? When you work to try to solve it, very easily just turn back into a subject-object split. I'm going to fix myself. That could have been, so Enku could have said to Ananda, you just don't meditate good enough, dude. It's like, you need cleaner meditation. And Ananda could have been like, okay, but that's not the story, right? He doesn't say, Ananda, you need to become a better practitioner. He doesn't say you need to purify your mind. He doesn't say any of those things, right? That turns into subject-object split so quickly. So often the subject-object split that it turns to is even just internal, right? Like, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that to fix the problem. Right? I'm going to rearrange my business, whatever that is. Right? And in rearranging that, the problem will be solved. Right? That's what we think. But this is just an extension of the thinking that is informed by greed, that is based in ignorance, that doesn't know how to recognize the wholeness and the particular as being present together. I have I guess what I have is a JPEG. I was going to say I have a picture. What I have is a JPEG, which I think is a data set that allows my computer to bring up this image when I want to see it. I would like to get a print made of this. It's from a museum, I believe in Tokyo, and it's a drawing of Enku. It's a drawing of Blazing Mouth, and he's pretty scary looking. He's kind of greenish in this particular picture, and he's got this little flame coming out of his mouth, but he's sitting like this in meditation. And the picture is a picture of a scroll. It's a scroll that's used for veneration. And Enku is sitting just like a Buddha in this scroll. In all of his ferociousness. And right here above his head is Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva. And in the iconography of Buddhism, this doesn't mean that Avalokiteshvara is coming to help him. It means that he is Avalokiteshvara. Right? When you see a being, an icon of a bodhisattva, if you look at their crown, the crown will have a Buddha in it. And you get to learn about the family of Buddhas from which this bodhisattva is emerging. Right? So in this case, it's a bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara in the crown of Blazing Mouth, or right here just above his head. And in fact, as I did some research on this, I found that in Korea, the Segaki, or the Hungry Ghost Festival, they make these big papier-mâché enkus, right? And they have a parade through the town with these big enkus. Enku is venerated. He's venerated as the Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara, as the Bodhisattva who is the hearer of the cries of the world. Enku actually shows up to Ananda as medicine. He's showing him his being. He's showing him karma. He's saying, this is the state. So this is very profound for this conundrum of what does it mean to practice the Buddha Dharma? What does it mean to bring Dharma medicine to ignorance? To this ignorance which so quickly turns the world into a subject and object kind of a game. Enku is inviting Ananda into the practice of generosity. And this is just it. This is what unlocks that conundrum. To face delusion, to face greed, to face hate. We have to face them not with manipulation, but with generosity, that's greed, with wisdom, and with loving kindness. So if we think about this situation where Enku, who is the archetype of greed, is appearing to Ananda, and he's telling him, you have to feed all of us. You can't sort of just save me, right? You can't lever me into heaven and then everything's going to be okay. This is about greed itself. This is about unlocking greed itself. And as Ananda goes to the Buddha teaches him a practice. But notice he teaches him a practice that comes from Avalokiteshvara. There's Ananda in the Buddha with Avalokiteshvara just holding them both. One arm is Enku, one arm is the way we normally think of Avalokiteshvara, and she's just embracing them, right? Not manipulating anything. The embrace of the difficulty of your life, of the karmic conundrum of unlocking your own particular situation, is part of what holds you, was part of what holds you in the Dharma and holds you in the Dharma practice. And so the offerings that Ananda must make, they are not offerings that are down to the unfortunate hungry ghosts. That's the way we would think about it oftentimes, right? Hungry ghosts, I'm better off than them. That's what we would think. Actually in the traditional story of it, we are. A human incarnation is better than a hungry ghost incarnation. Congratulations. But they're right up against each other, these two realms, right? The human realm and the realm of the hungry ghost. They share so much. And greed is the thing that marks both of them. Right? And so as we make an offering, the offering to the hungry ghosts, it can't be an offering that goes down to some unfortunate beings. We want to make the offering up. We want to make the offering up to the Buddha, to the wholeness of each being, including those hungry ghosts. Those hungry ghosts are whole beings. They are particulars which don't stand in the way of wholeness. And so our offerings have to be offerings to unlock, for them to be the true practice that the Buddha is trying to teach Ananda and trying to teach us. They have to be offerings which are to the completeness of the Buddha's awakening. How do we see that within the karmic struggle of our life? The place where we want things to be different, but it won't budge. What is it to make an offering to that? This is the central question of Segaki. So the offering, I said earlier, if we want to talk about nourishment on a physical sense, we talk about food. But what is nourishment on the side of our soul, or our heart, or our mind? What is nourishment there? What is the fundamental building blocks of awareness, of consciousness? We're investigating this all the time in our meditation, right? But if you think, I'm just going to offer my awareness to the things that seem very lofty, I will turn into a hungry ghost. I only want the lofty things. Perhaps this was Ananda's karma. And so Enku had to show up and say, wait a minute, there's all kinds of non-lofty things which also are completely luminous at their core. How will you care for them? As we learn to bring nourishment in all facets of our being, making the offering of that nourishment to the Buddha mind, which is present in all things. The world that looked like blood and pus and fire begins to look like apples, begins to look like rice, begins to look like peach pie. And this is the reason that we take this practice of Osegaki so seriously. We don't just have kind of a party, although it also is a party. Usually this year with COVID, I'm getting really sick of COVID. I don't know about you guys, by the way. We have to do it a different way. But usually it's quite celebratory. It's a big deal. We have flags through the hall and lots of symbols and clanging and vigorous sutra chanting, and we all share a meal together and all of those things. It is a kind of celebration, but the reason we do that is because this is the celebration of a continual practice that says, I will not relegate the dark things to the dark, as if the dark meant I didn't have to pay attention to them. I'm going to see that Avalokiteshvara appears to me in many forms, and that my work is to respond to her teaching with the same kind of generosity with which she offers that teaching to me. And so we do this practice actually of Segaki every day here at the temple, well, all weekdays, throughout the year. There's a little bit shorter version. And then during the month of October, every day we do full Segaki. Maybe sometimes it's 3 people, sometimes it's 6 people or whatever. That happens at 4 o'clock. We've been doing it throughout October. We'll continue this week until the Segaki on Sunday. And the reason we do that continuously is because it's so easy to get off track with this, to think that practice is about whipping ourselves into shape, right? About heaving a heavier load, rather than finding this core light which is there inside of even one piece of rice. Even one piece of rice is the center of that entirety of the cosmos. Any questions or comments?
We live in a particularly materialistic culture with a lot of acquisition as our goal, as you've been speaking.
Yeah.
It'd be nice to have a ritual for our whole nation.
Yeah.
That we could practice.
I agree. You know one thing we can do is we can practice this ritual for our whole nation. And this is also part of this teaching, that we think doing a small thing is small. Mm-hmm. But that's where we get in trouble in the first place. Mm-hmm. We think things are small and big. But that one grain of rice unlocks the whole conundrum through the dharani, or through the incantation of the Buddha's wisdom and compassion. So I really believe in that. And I believe it in a practical way, which is that we have to build a society that visions the world in that way. And that can't happen through one big flashy thing. Mm-hmm. It has to happen through diligent, consistent orientation. Lives have to be poured into that. And our whole life. And we'll die, and we won't see the fruit of it. We'll see some fruit of it, but not the entirety. But that's where the real shift of the human world comes from, I believe. Mm-hmm. Hi.
I'm just getting clarification. It seems that what you're saying or outlining is the relationship between giving and receiving, or like the sameness of them. Is that kind of what you're
in this ritual?
Yes.
Yeah, that the
it's
giving,
like not getting stuck in now I'm giving, or not getting stuck in now I'm receiving. Like each action is the same.
Yeah, that's very important, very central to the medicine of generosity. That giving and receiving are inseparable. And so when we think, I'm giving, but we don't realize the receiving side of it, not just that person is receiving what I'm giving them, or that being is giving what I'm receiving them, but I'm also receiving something. Mm-hmm. When we don't tune into that, then generosity is still good, but it doesn't have the capacity to really turn over the ignorance that is at the center of organizing principle of much of our life. So that part is important. The other part I'm saying here is that we should think about the medicine of generosity as being something that always is, there's no such thing as generosity which is handed down. We never hand down. When we're doing that, it's not the practice of generosity. Even though we may be giving something, it's not the practice of generosity. Generosity always requires us to be making that practice of generosity to seeing into the Buddha nature of where that offering is being made. And then the opposite is also true. When I'm being given a teaching, or I'm being given some material help, the receiving of that is not like receiving down, like I'm bad, right? And I'm getting this thing that will help me figure out how to be good. It's that offering comes right to the Buddha that is right here. And so this happens right inside of the moment-to-moment structure of our consciousness, that we're constantly thinking in those kinds of terms, like, oh, I'm giving, I'm up, and the thing I'm giving to is down. Oh, I'm receiving, I'm down, and the thing I'm receiving from is up. And what I'm proposing here is that actually there's something beyond that up and down, or we could say maybe located right in the center of that up and down, that is really liberating. And especially in our own being. You know, I can't say this enough times. Maybe I'll just give a whole year of Dharma talks where I'll just say the same thing again and again, and maybe everyone will stop coming. I'll just say, stop hating yourself. And you can just say that. That's not the, you know, that doesn't just make it automatically go away. But this is teaching us something about that. This is saying, if you want to get out of that conundrum, make an offering. Make an offering to the things that you think are ugly. Right? But make an offering to the things that you think are ugly as Buddhas. And make an offering to the whole assembly of that ugliness. And make an offering to all of the beings that you hold in great regard. And all of the three treasures. Because in making that offering, you see that they're not separate. When we do Segaki, we don't make a separate offerings for that. It's all one thing, right? And in fact, we encourage the hungry ghosts in the offerings we make. We encourage them. We give them uncooked food, and we encourage them. They say, cook this food and give it to the Buddhas, right? But you see, we're giving them the food. There's all these layers of fractals that are happening in this ritual work. That's just wonderful. I know this is a little out there, but you're giving an offering and then asking the being you're giving the offering to prepare it and make an offering. And then that offering, so the being that you're making the offering to, that you're endeavoring to make an offering to a being as a Buddha, and that Buddha that you're offering to, you're encouraging to make that being to make an offering to the Buddha. There's just offering upon offering upon offering.
The word I get stuck on is offering. Is it about nourishment? Like you're nourishing the being? Is that?
So to make an offering is just to share. To share then is nourishment. Yeah. So in the case of food, if we think about food as the organizing idiom for this, which is what is happening in this particular practice, if we have food, we just share it, right? And we don't share it like this way, like, oh, here's some crumbs. We say, oh, you're also hungry, so here's some food, right? And by the way, I'm not just giving this food to you as a hungry being. I'm giving this food to you as a hungry being and encouraging you and seeing the Buddha-ness inside of that hungry being. And I'm encouraging you to also see that Buddha-ness by giving this food to the holy ones and the Buddhas, which are inside of you as you eat it. You know, before we eat something here at the temple and we chant and we say, first this is for the three treasures, next for the four benefactors, finally for the beings in the six realms, may all be equally nourished. It's very interesting because we're going to eat the food, right? It's not like we take a spoonful and then try to like chuck it at the three treasures, right? Actually, I've got to take the bite. I've got to be the three treasures. Right? So we're encouraging that.
Thank you.
Yeah. Hi.
I hate to do this, but I find myself thinking about it very often. I have a bumper sticker on my car from Sanders that says, it's not me, it's us. And it seems to me that when we're talking about these hungry ghosts, it seems, I hate to bring in capital politics to this. It seems to me that capitalism is about greed, and it's about me, and it's about you, and maybe we'll give some crumbs to the other people. But Buddhism seems to be about everybody, and it seems to be socialist in that sense. So I hate to say that, but every time I hear this, it reinforces me.
Yeah, yeah. Tenkan, you don't hate to bring it in. But it's fine to bring it in. It's fine to bring it in. If we can't talk about that, then what what are we doing? I think there's a place to be a little bit careful. And one is, if we think about capitalism as an economic system and a theory, then there's that's one way we can look at it. And then we look at the kind of actuality on the ground way that our economy and society function. And those are related, but they're not exactly the same thing. Without getting too much into the theory of it, because I think there's some part of kind of capitalist theory which talks about the way in which we understand the whole through the individual needs of beings and the way that would balance markets, etc. But that's a lot of theory. In actuality, we have given way in our society. I don't even know if we can call it capitalism. We can call it a corporate consumerist social structure in which, for the purposes of being able to harness certain kinds of wealth and power, for some for helpful reasons and many for unhelpful reasons, we have given way to a consumer-minded social organization. And we're very quickly turning this human world into the world of hungry ghosts.
Yeah.
We are forming this world as that, and we're eating ourselves in the process, and we're eating the world up in the process. So I'm very worried about that. What is the solution? I think there's a broad range of the ways that we might approach that, but I think we could say, generally speaking, that if we don't move out of a way of life which continually places the center a sense of lack for the purposes of getting people to exercise a certain kind of greed that can be harnessed, right? Yeah. To make excess wealth for people who are playing that game to extract that excess wealth, we're in trouble. Is that socialism? Is that communism? Is that a different kind of capitalism? I have my own ideas about that, but I hesitate to line them up with the Dharma as if the Dharma is saying we have to be socialist. I think what the Dharma is saying is, if we put greed at the center, we're going to live in the realm of the hungry ghosts. That's just inevitable. If we're going to unseat greed as the center, what's that going to look like? To me, that's the real question.
In Europe, I noticed they call it social democracy. Mm-hmm. And most countries have limits of the excesses of capitalism mm-hmm. and the excesses of socialism. Mm-hmm. And so that's what Bernie Sanders is, by the way. He calls himself a democratic socialist.
Yeah. And I think on a personal level, I'm super game for going that direction. Yeah. And I also realize when I look at states that are lean more toward democratic socialism, they are not without social ills. They are not without greed at the center of things. They are not without all these host of problems. And so, if we look at the realm of politics as being the instrument of salvation, I think we're going to come up short. It doesn't mean that the political and social arrangement and how that happens shouldn't be engaged. It definitely should be, and I think Buddhists need to engage in it. But we're not going to solve this essential conundrum through politics. The place we're going to turn it over is right here, and that has to be the foundation for a larger spiritual awakening. That's my belief.
Thank you.
Is everyone ready to get up and run around a little bit and warm up? Maybe. Mula yang